That's Debatable is sponsored by MB&G. MB&G is specialists in the esoteric world of vehicle and furniture warranty insurance, delivering quite marvellous customer service, prompt claims payment, and a highly developed understanding of how to deliver these products in a way that is both compliant with the regulations and attractive to customers. To find out more, call Paul Smith, the Managing Director, on 07887 501 441. That's 07887 501 441. Welcome to That's Debatable, the weekly news podcast of the Free Speech Union. Welcome back to all of our listeners and welcome back to all of our viewers. And we are very excited this week to have a guest with us who is a member of the Free Speech Union, one of the 3,300 individuals that we've helped since we started the Free Speech Union back in February 2020. And that person is Martin Speake. He is a musician. Martin, it's great to have you.
Thanks so much for doing this. I'm really looking forward to telling my story in a bit of detail.
Brilliant. No, we're really excited to have you. And we were talking before we clicked go about music and all sorts of people in our various networks where we cross over, and we may know, that it's a small world, isn't it?
We're all connected, aren't we? Yeah.
We're all connected. But let's jump straight in, Martin. We're in the process of helping you. Do you want to give a little bit of background on sort of who you are, what kind of a musician you are, and what actually happened to you? Because you got cancelled, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, and am still. Yeah, so I'm a saxophone player and educator, improviser, and composer. And I suppose I've been doing it professionally for over 40 years. I mean, yeah, and I've been teaching in jazz higher education for 35 years. To Royal Academy of Music for 35 years, Guildhall School of Music and Drama for 18, and then where the incident happened, Trinity, Laban, Conservatoire, which is in Greenwich, 22 years there. So I'm very embedded in that system, but also a performer. I've performed all over the world. I've done 25 CDs under my own name and one other recordings. So there's two things: there's the jazz education and there's the performing and composing. And I loved it. I'm not doing a job that I don't like. I woke up every morning loving it. I mean, loving going to see the students because, I've always said they're special people, because this music, which for want of a better word is called jazz, but as soon as you say jazz to someone, I'm a bit reticent about saying that, but I suppose I am a jazz musician. People are immediately, that means Louis Armstrong or Kenny G, or it just means, or Nat King Cole, or it could be anybody. So it's not one thing. So I love and hate the word, it's not one thing. But I'm a jazz musician, I suppose, for want of a better word. So I've been very lucky in a lot of ways. The teaching was involved with is at a very high level. And I always say to the students, you're special people because how do you get into this music? It's not really on the radio. It's not on television. It's not in the street, where it's very special people, so there is that. And that's, with all this issue that I'll talk about, it's the sadness of losing this is the big thing for me. I mean, I'm angry sometimes about it, but it's more the sadness and the feel betrayed by a lot of people. So the story is, nearly a year ago now, February, the principal of Trinity Laban sent an email to all staff and students. And this is a very significant point. I'll say it again later to remind listeners, because it was to all staff and students and promoting BLM, Black Lives Matter Diversity Action Plan, whatever that meant. So I read the documents and he's saying there's systemic inequality in our institution, and he's thought of the wider world, he gave the impression of, about that. And we're doing okay, but we've got to do much better. And we've got 50% global majority on the board of governors. And as you know, the new term global majority, well, it's new to me. I didn't know about it because it used to be ethnic minority. Now it's global majority. All these terms change all the time, don't they? Or people of color, or once there's black people, depends what generation. There are all these different words that change. Anyway, so he's saying we've got 50% global majority on the board of governors. I thought, that's a bit odd for a start, because there's not 50% so-called global majority in Britain. So I thought, well, that's a little bit of a red flag for me already. And so he's saying this, but the point is that he asked for feedback. This is a really crucial point. So he's asking staff and students for feedback on his BLM diversity action plan at Trinity Laban. Thinking I was a valued member of staff, I responded.
Did you reply directly? Was it an individual response, Martin, that you sent?
Well, what I did was I copied to him my line manager, which is the head of jazz, who unfortunately, sadly, really sadly, has been a friend of mine for 30 years until this happened. And so I copied to the head of jazz and the director of music, which was his line manager. He's the principal, director of music, head of jazz. That's the kind of pyramid structure of control, or whatever you want to think about it. And I'm below that. But I actually was a valued member of staff in the sense that I was second down to the head of jazz because he was full-time and I was on a 0.5 fractional post, half a job. Officially, probably 2.5 days, but I'd be there 4 days.
So your reply was a serious engagement, wasn't it? And I've read it. I mean, if it's accurately represented, I saw it posted underneath a video that is on YouTube, an interview you did. And it's a serious reply. It's not something you've sent out in order to cause trouble or stir anything up. It's a very serious engagement with the issues. Can I ask, one thing I was curious about is why that was so late. So February 24 sounds quite late for this sort of a BLM response to be happening.
That's so interesting. It's very odd. I think that's such a good point, Jan, because why is he using that? But I tell you, there's background to this. Black Lives in Music, BLIM, was formed, I think, around the George Floyd incident, end of 2020, beginning 2021. And you can still see this on Trinity Laban's website. There's a big announcement. We are collaborating with Black Lives in Music, and we're the first conservatoire to do this. So my view on the whole thing is that Black Lives in Music are script writing for the principal. I mean, I can't prove that, but for me, he feels out of his depth in the subject matter of race.
Just give people a flavour. Just give people a flavour of what was in your response in your email.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't got it in front of me, but the basic premise was he's saying systemic inequality for a start in the institution, which is in music, and so I broadened it out and I said, well, look, first of all, could we have a discussion about this? My experience in jazz and playing all over the world and teaching in these institutions, probably even before he was there, certainly before he was principal, is my personal experience is I don't have that experience. And in fact, I would say jazz is one of the most egalitarian musics there, in the world. It's never been in Britain. And by the way, I'm talking in Britain because people sometimes bring up and say, well, black people invented jazz in America. Okay, yeah, all my heroes, most of my heroes are black. I've got Charlie Parker on my wall poster and Ornette Coleman, who are black innovators in the music. Of course, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about he's making a point which is saying the classic thing of white people are privileged. He didn't say that in exact words, but white people are privileged. Black people are, didn't say the word underprivileged, not recognised as much. So why I broadened it out, because that was the message I was getting from him. I might be mistaken, but that's how I felt. So in my email, which you've read, and everyone can read it, it's online all over the place now, I listed a lot of black musicians who, many of whom I'm friends with, have played with, 4 of whom got OBEs or MBEs. And I'm not begrudging any of this. My point is they're being accepted and promoted by the system. It doesn't mean they're 100% successful every day and doing thousands of gigs and are millionaires. It doesn't mean it. But what I'm saying is they are not under-recognised at all. Mm. And certainly in comparison to the amount of black musicians and white musicians. So in fact, I would say that they are not, the term's not over-recognised, but there is positive discrimination going on. I mean, hugely. Whether people agree or disagree with it, that's sort of irrelevant in the way it's going on. You know, like, people sent me job descriptions recently, or festivals, music festivals, saying, "Well, we want 50% or 75% global majority. You've got to have someone from the global majority in your band." I mean, I've heard so many anecdotes over the last year, people sending me emails. Yeah, Ronnie Scott's club, for instance, which you both would have heard of probably. So someone's doing a gig there, and the Ronnie Scotts say, "Oh, we're gonna stream the gig, the band video." Said, "But can you get a black person in the band?" I mean, they're telling the band to change their band. It's outrageous. So this is going on. I don't know whether that's answering your question, but because there was a lot in my email. So I'm mentioning my point is that
well, you're disputing the idea that there is systemic racism within the Conservatoire and within the wider jazz world, and you were kind of presenting evidence as to why that wasn't the case, which it's pretty convincing to me. And I know there's always been this sniffiness about white jazz musicians and this kind of sense that somehow it's not quite as authentic, but I think people properly within the jazz world wouldn't think that. It's like the sort of Philistines view from the outside. It's like, I remember people saying this kind of rubbish, but that was very much from a non-expert perspective, and anybody immersed in the scene would be just delighted by the music. So and then I think, if I remember rightly, presumably you're concerned for the students themselves if this kind of message of victimhood is somehow put out to students who are going to struggle anyway, because to trying to make a living out of music is incredibly difficult. But to sort of think that it's stacked against them is bad for any student, but also that this kind of tokenism that you're talking about, where almost like, well, it's almost reverse tokenism, isn't it? You've got to have a kind of a lessening of the presence of white musicians in order to kind of send this broader message out, which is, totally antithetical to the integrity of music or any art form. So you sent that reply, but you sent it as any kind of responsible professional might do. You sent it to the people involved directly in the conversation, but then you didn't receive a response to that, did you? I don't think. And then it went somehow later on, your email got shared much more widely in quite a malicious way. So do you want to take us on to how that came about?
Yeah, also, if I remember, we go back to it in a minute, I want to talk about the music itself, what you touched on then about black musicians being, oh, the music should be black, or I'll just say something about that now quickly, actually. So what people would describe it as jazz was formed in America. No question. And African Americans were some of the main innovators in the music, and they're really big influences in my life. However, black musicians in Britain are very different. It's a totally different background. It's not African American. So in a way, by the way, jazz is in every country in the world now. So it's in Sweden, it's in Japan, it's in Australia. It's in countries where there's nobody with a black skin, right? So it's not all African American music. Some people want to hang on to that tradition, and I'm very inspired by it, but I'm also inspired by lots of European versions of jazz. You see what I mean? So it's not one thing now. And the British jazz scene, although some elements want to be just like American jazz musicians, many others, it's a melting pot of all kinds of influences, including folk music, classical music, traditions of this country. I just want to say something about that. The further with my story, okay, so this was in February. 5 weeks later, I got a response from the director of music, one down from the principal. So, by the way, the principal has never responded in the whole year. I mean, about anything, and I know it. I've been away with him to Seoul in Korea for Trinity Laban, to recruit or to have a collaboration with the college. So he knows me. He could even pop in and chat with me when I was there. Didn't want to do that. So he passes the buck to the director of music. Director of music first says, after 5 weeks, "Oh, sorry for the delay. I know they read it on the day I got it. They got it, by the way. Sorry for the delay of 5 weeks. But you've raised a lot of points here. Yeah, well, let's make an appointment and come in and talk about it." I thought, oh, that's a good response. Then the next morning, he says, send me another email. "Due to your email getting into the hands of students, and one of them's gone in and is anxious, we are temporarily halting your classes." Now, I'm just going to go back. Why it got into the hands of students is because I shared it with one student, an intelligent student who we was chatting about things. And I think, if I remember rightly, I walked into a classroom and he was practicing saxophone. And then we got talking about this subject. I said, oh, well, I happen to have responded to the principal's email asking for feedback. The principal asked for feedback and sharing experience. And this is my view at the moment, in this moment in time. So why don't I send it to you by email and then we can have a chat tomorrow? So the student and I had a chat the next day and it was neither one thing nor the other. He said, oh, it could be interpreted a different way. And I didn't think any more of it. But he then read it out to 4 or 5, 6, maybe said students, 4 or 5 students on different times because they were criticising me, probably about that subject, maybe, or something. So he said, no, you got it all wrong about Martin, but he happens to have sent me this, so I'm going to read out his actual opinion. So that's quite impressive in a way. But he didn't give it to them. This is even more impressive. He didn't send it to them. He just read it out to them. And that's when one of them then went into the head of jazz, my line manager, and I don't know what was exactly said, but the head of jazz said to me, oh, the student came in and he was flailing around and he was angry or anxious about your email. I don't agree with Martin's email, blah, blah, blah. And so instead of coming to me and saying, let's get Martin in, let's all have a chat about this issue and agree to disagree or have an adult conversation, he bypassed me. He went then to his line manager, director of music, and they organised a meeting and said, we want you to come in and talk about this. It's slightly nuanced. I'm just going to go back because it's really interesting what happened. Is that so they temporarily halted my classes. That's what it was called. The week after. This happened on a Friday. So this was the week after. And just to give you how it worked, how I worked there, it was I'm going for 3 days, 3 days of classes, not full days, but about half the course. I probably saw most of the course every week. And then another evening, I would listen to concerts called Performance Platform, and we give informal feedback. I loved it. So I was engaged with every year of students. And there's about 100 students there. So 95, I think, including 4 years of undergraduate and a handful of postgrads, master's students. So they cancelled or temporarily halted my classes. So what I did was, it was quite interesting, this, I have to tell you, that I emailed the students at the weekend who would have been in my classes the week after. And I said, look, if I come in to teach, will you come to my classes? Because they are cancelling my classes because a student has said they're anxious and doesn't want to come. And what was so interesting about the response was pretty much all the students, these are second and third year students, so they're 19, 20, 21, emailed back, said, this is ridiculous. Just because a student is anxious, they shouldn't cancel your classes. Yeah, we're all going to come in and to your classes.
That's so interesting.
So interesting because, and I said, great. And then, but they were monitoring my emails at college, I think. And then once the students on the Monday found out what the email was about, even though they hadn't seen it, it was about race. It's not really about race, actually. It's more about skin colour, which is a different thing, I think. But anyway, it's about jazz and race, whatever, white, black people playing jazz, all this stuff, positive discrimination, systemic inequality. It's all about that. They then decided not to come to my classes. Now, what happened on the Monday, which is pretty shocking, I have to say, the head of jazz cancelled a meeting with me and the other fractional post colleagues, which is 3 other members of staff, which is going to be talking about performance platforms. One of the classes that I do, get feedback on the Thursday night, Monday nights actually. And anyway, he cancelled it. I thought, why has he cancelled it? And he never told me why. I said, why have you cancelled it? He didn't respond. And then I still wouldn't have known about this, but one student was still in touch with me. And that evening, on the Monday evening, he'd organised a meeting with the whole of the student body. 95 students, the only time they'd ever turned up the whole of them turned up. They loved it because they'd heard about my email. So they're all what's Martin said? But they know me. I got on with all of them. Or most of them probably got on, and they knew me well. I'd given some of them gigs. I'd practiced in my own time with them. They knew I'm outspoken, but they knew who I was. And that was so interesting. So this student said, they're having a meeting about your email. He texted me, having a meeting about, this is a postgrad student who I got on with and probably agrees with me about all this stuff.
Was there a sort of, do you think there was was there a sort of political activist element to this, or was this more spontaneous? Do you think there were
That's
kind
a
of
really good question.
agitators who were trying to stir things up at that time?
That's a really good question. Yeah, it probably is, because you have to remember, Black Lives in Music is involved there. There's that going on, and that policy, which I believe this all stems from. And then there's a few young students who are probably very influenced by that, white or black. And then the other thing about all this is that the rest, in the big picture, are too scared to speak out about this. They are too scared, and so I know that's the case. So they're just going along with what you call the instigators, or this ideology that is pressuring
So
them. They're young people, So that, I think, was
these
going
kind
on.
of, sorry to butt in, but these kinds of, I mean, these dynamics are very, very, in a way, familiar to us. This kind of, where something gains momentum, there's a sort of initial trigger, which spins out of control, and then you get this kind of group mindset of some kind that kind of fuels and enacts the cancellation. But can I just move you on to some of the other consequences that you face? So looking at just so people can go online and see your crowdfunder appeal, which I noticed is at over 13,000, nearly 14,000 pounds has been raised so far. Now this is going to be very costly action with your employment tribunal. So we've got a target of 33,000, I think, is up there on the crowdfunder. But there's all the details.
That's only for the next month. I think we got to.
Yeah, well, yes, and so there's all the details up there and the timescale, and so people can go and look at that for themselves. I'd encourage them to do that. I'd also encourage them to go and listen to your music, which I spent a very pleasant afternoon yesterday. Pleasant's the wrong word; that makes it sound bland. It really isn't bland. I listened to Intentions, your album, and it's just brilliant.
Oh, and, so much.
But to kind of go on, so this then spiraled into, you lost your role within the London Jazz Orchestra. Groups and people were refusing to play your compositions. So you're not just a musician, you're a composer. And they were refusing to play your compositions. All of your scheduled performances were cancelled. Venues cancelled you. Your album that was in production, I think, was halted. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, have you watched the film Tar, Martin, or is it too unbearable to watch?
Which one?
Tar, about the female conductor with
Tar.
Kate Blanchett in it. TAR.
Did I watch
it's
that?
About exactly this.
I think I did watch that, yeah.
Yeah, I know some people who've experienced this cancellation can't bear to watch it because it's far too close to home, but it's very similar, where kind of students start to drive this reaction.
That's interesting, because I watched it before I was cancelled, because it came out a while ago, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. What you're saying is,
well, Jan, it's all brilliant what you're saying. But the other thing, I tell you what, is Lionel Shriver, who of course you know, but she's a friend of mine because I play with her husband, who's a drummer, Jeff Williams, and he's on some of my records, And I emailed her and I said, Lionel, I'm living your book, which is the book Mania, who probably, I think Toby interviewed about it, didn't he? Or somebody, maybe you did, Jen, I can't remember. Yeah. So, of course, all this stuff is out there, and I was observing, and they're all, oh my God, it's happened to me now.
Yeah.
It's nice, but the points you make it, and as you said that, my heart sunk a little bit then, because and I'm pretty strong, but it's actually completely shocking. And so, I can forgive. I'm all for forgiveness, right, and all this, and I can forgive young people to a certain extent, and I will forgive all these people. But London Jazz Orchestra is shocking what they've done. These are adult people that I've played with them for 15 years. It's not even a money-making thing, by the way. It's like just a one gig at the Vortex Jazz Club, which also cancelled me totally. They're totally that club.
I won't go there again then.
Shocking, absolutely shocking what their behaviour. Yeah. So, what you're saying, those things, and all those things are really painful. And the most painful one was this friend of mine, which you touched on there, drummer up north, and he took my music to rehearse in his own quartet, and that's it. And they said, we're not playing his compositions. And he said, why not? I said, don't you know what's going on? This is nearly a year ago. Look online, and my friend hadn't looked online. He was very supportive of me anyway, but it's outrageous, But there's so much. First of all, there's so much what people call virtue signaling now going on. There's so much intimidation and pressure, and what it's about for all these musicians, the students, and they've said that to me at the beginning of this. One of the students I played with a lot, he said, because they're at the beginning of their career and they see, well, this is what we do now at the moment. Yeah, he's the enemy now, and then my friends will give me gigs. If I stand up and say, this is ridiculous, which it is, what's he done wrong? He's brought up an issue that's challenging for people we should talk about. No, you're cancelled. So this is answering your question earlier. There's stuff going on I don't know about, but I definitely think there's almost a plan here with this.
But this is the scary thing, Martin, that and that was one of my questions, is whether you had an inkling that this might happen right at the beginning. But the way that you put forward a view, an alternative view, which actually is mainstream.
It's mainstream.
Most people
in the street.
Most people in the street, most people in the country, most people in the world would sign up to the ideas that Martin Luther King put forward, that everyone should be judged on the content of their character, not on the color of their skin, and in the context of music, on their inherent talent and their love of the music and their desire to get better at jazz.
Yeah.
And that is the driving force, or ought to be the driving force, of everything in education, particularly as Jan says, in an art form. So most people think that, and yet this is sort of drip, drip, drip. It's blown up for you in your world, and then it's gone further because your world's actually got many, many layers to it as a composer, as a performer. So it's gone geographic, and yet every stage this fear has been present. It's so odd, isn't it, Mark? Did you have an inkling that it was even like this at all?
You described it very well, and it's fear is driving everything. I'm not frightened. That's the thing. I'm not in fear because I want to speak my truth. And I'm so grateful to FSU over this last year.
And when did you come to us, Martin?
Well, interesting. I even think I joined 2 weeks after this happened or something. I can't remember. It was somehow got backdated. I mean, a year ago, something, or longer. I can't remember. But it was brilliant. But there's some other things you touched on there. First of all, the ramifications are actually huge for me because the other, show how pathetic it all is, the other two institutions, remember, one I've been at 35 years and the other one 18, high-level institutions, They both said, oh no, the students have read your email and they want to change their one-to-one lessons with you, so we'll do that. I went to a meeting with the head of jazz and the director of music when they tried to get me back into college, which I'll go into in a second, in September. I said to them, this is ridiculous. Students decide everything. They said, yeah. They admitted it. The students are in control because they are customers. So this leads back to the whole introduction of fees, which is also a terrible thing in my view. Because people are paying twice. You're paying taxes, higher education, and you pay again. They're just laughing at us, right? But that's the further thing. Okay, the two other colleges, they've not got rid of me, but they're just, because the students decide, and then the new students come in first years and they've heard about the story and they're told by the older students, no, you shouldn't have lessons. That's what's going on. No question.
I find it so, it's very upsetting to hear. I'm sure it's just devastating for you, but it's that idea of your or everything in your world. So because you're part of a university as well, I mean, I know this happens to people. Like we interviewed Graham Linehan last week, and obviously that is a total cancellation, and he wasn't a university lecturer, but there's something about being within a university and that kind of world turning against you, and then it goes beyond that world and sort of just keeps on growing. And I just can't. I can't imagine it. It's like it is just an absolute nightmare. It's the kind of thing I do have nightmares about.
Right,
and luckily, I'm not in academia anymore. But I can just imagine that, because unless the institution says this is bullshit, we stand by Martin. He did a very reasonable thing, and we're taking seriously his suggestions. And you guys need to stop the rumours, stop the gossip, and get on with studying and taking full advantage of how brilliant and how lucky you are to have Martin teaching you. That's what you need. That's what you need. And it's so unusual for any institution to stand by their professionals. And it's that's what it would take. And if that happened, it would stop it dead. And I can't think of an example where that's happened.
It's very interesting, and the whole thing you're saying there, Joe, is so true. It's the end of these places for me. It's not, unless they turn around. And Trinity won't turn around, but maybe the other colleges might think. I don't think so, though. They're stuck. They're really stuck in this ideology now. There's some other things you said there. It's so, the whole thing though is so condescending for black people. Don't forget that as well. This is so condescending for black and white people, actually. The whole thing, and that I feel sorry for all these students. They're totally in fear. But of course, what people don't really realise, there are historical precedents for this behaviour. It's also like the COVID era, by the way, which we don't have to get into too much. But it's like snitch on your neighbours and all this, or just make someone a scapegoat, which is what they're trying to do here. So, historically, we know this happened in Nazi Germany. We know it happened in Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge, the whole of the Eastern Bloc, all over the world. And Ian Pace wrote an amazing article called On Mobbing for the journal Sex Matters. You maybe know about this, but and he mentioned me in there, and it was chilling when I read it because the research is so deep and the examples. And these students, that's exactly what they're doing, but they're being led by the college because a year ago, the college put on Instagram immediately, and you probably know about this, we are in awe of our students' behaviour. So
in thrall or in awe?
What did you say?
In thrall to our students or in awe of our students?
The principal said in awe of our students.
But the reality, well, I mean, it is so. Another element of this that frustrates me is the term global majority, which you mentioned right at the beginning, because of course, that it would include. I mean, it's the topsy-turvy nature of that terminology, and where are the boundaries? What counts? What doesn't count? So Japanese students, do they count?
Oh no, they're not important, probably.
Are they? Yeah, exactly. And your point as well about snitching, Martin, we in our work, snitching portals are back. We've seen them crop up in universities where you can anonymously snitch on people. And it was a big thing during the rollout of the Hate Crime Act in Scotland as well. You can go anywhere and you can snitch on another citizen. Now, I'm all for reporting crime, real crime. But this idea of snitching on what people are saying, what people are thinking, is back, and it's back with a vengeance. And it sounds like you've experienced that.
I mean, this is 1984. There's no question. This is people have written, Orwell and Huxley and Brave New World. This is what is going on. People are not realising. I mean, maybe you realise. I think you guys realise, but this is what's going on. It's creeping up. Well, not creeping. It's really fast. So you mentioned those things. At these colleges now, they have, what do they have? Something, QR codes to report exactly what you're saying. What do they call it?
Yeah, report and something or other. They call them various different things.
Microaggressions.
Right, yeah.
This is it. This, which could mean someone's looking at you in the wrong way. Right?
Yeah. They're not actually. A lot of the authorities don't seem to be worried about macroaggressions.
No,
where you're run over on the pavement by a bicycle out of control, or which happens to me most days at the moment. I'm really worried about 3 and 4 year olds out and about, getting run over by things. So macroaggressions. But microaggressions are what people really get exorcised about.
But as you've spotted, Martin, is that also this is a lesson for students. This is the lesson that the students are learning.
Yeah.
And all young people know these are the rules. These are the new rules of how you can speak and conduct yourself. So luckily they have somebody like you who is carrying on speaking, because you could have gone silent and you haven't. So and it really matters that there's people like you who carry on speaking out and telling the story of how this works, because it's so important. Because at some point we're going to have all of this will be joined together, and we'll realize, I mean, it could be 20 years down the line, we'll realize what this moment in history was.
Yeah.
When this particular kind of I don't know, people used to call it soft totalitarianism. I don't think there's anything soft about it.
No.
It's even more totalitarian than totalitarianism, because you don't even have allies. You don't even have a kind of general consensus amongst people that that's the authority, and we're in a bit of a game, and some of us will betray each other, but generally we're the underground, if you like. And at the moment, people like you are I think a lot of the time very left to fight for yourself. That's why the Free Speech Union exists, because you don't have your colleagues or the trade, whatever, musicians union, if that still exists, or whatever it is, coming in and having your back. So it's yeah, I mean, I well, anyway, I could go on all day about just dreadful injustice of this.
Thanks again. I just wanted to say something, because, yeah, once again, Free Speech Union has been amazing, because I had nowhere else to turn, because I'd left the Musicians Union because I was unhappy about their whole COVID attitude, and the UCU as well. I was unhappy about it, and I feel that trade unions have been hijacked now. They're very different from when I was growing up as a kid. It was just a very different thing, and it's very, very sad for me, but sign of the times, that these people at this Trinity Laban would jump in to take my work immediately. Other colleagues who I would have chatted with every day, they've gone in and taken my work. And the old days, these were called scabs, by the way. When I was in trade, if you was in a trade union, you support your colleagues. This is injustice. This is huge injustice. Freedom of speech. He's asked for a response. He's made a response. What? And he's been completely blacklisted and ignored by everyone. And you're going to go in and take my job? And that's just what they've done.
Yeah,
there's that element to it as well.
Yeah, and it's an expropriation. We need to arrest this kind of thing really, really. I mean, now is too late in some ways, but we have to start really making some impact with the devastating effect of this on our kind of culture and society. I think obviously people are realizing, but it has to keep on gaining momentum, which is why cases like yours are so important. Do you want to should we just quickly say what the kind of legal steps are? Not necessarily the kind of, the intricacies of it, but so you're filing a claim against Trinity Laban for discrimination and harassment. That's not going to be heard until September this year, I think. And
so there's in employment discrimination, and then they made it so untenable for me there, because I haven't finished the whole story yet, because the 100% boycott of my classes when they said, oh, you can come back in September. So I went in 5 weeks in a row, 3 days a week, and nobody turned up to my class. So I just practiced and composed, and then no one's talking to me at all. No staff really or student. And then they said a half term, well, this is not feasible, is it? We're going to give your work to other teachers because the students are losing out on their education. That was it. They made it untenable, so then I resigned. So there's the two things: in employment discrimination and constructive dismissal. In September this year, there's just the online initial tribunal. Well, that's not the full one. The full one's the year after in August. 8 days, which costs thousands, doesn't it? I mean, loads. Of course, there's always a time they could settle before then, but they seem to be digging their feet in, so we'll see. But that's what's going on. I mean, let me just say the insanity of this is that the other thing I think I didn't say to you was I emailed the student who was anxious and the student I shared the email with, right, and the head of jazz, and I said, why don't we get together that initial weekend in March? Why don't we get together and just talk about this? I'm sure we can sort it out. And the student who was anxious said, yeah, I disagree with what you're saying, but I'm sure we can sort this out. This is incredible. I've got that evidence. They would have done it. Right. And the head of jazz ignored that, even though I copied him in, and went straight to the director of music. So this is the plan. The plan is we want to be the most anti-racist conservatoire in the world. Somehow I'm racist. It's outrageous. But the other thing maybe you need to know, your viewers need to know, is that I got arrested when I was 18 protesting against the National Front, which was a racist organisation, marching through were green. They got arrested. And then I was thinking about this the other day, and the other thing I did was I went to my old school. I'm not necessarily recommending this, by the way. Went to my old school when I'd left in the middle of the night with some other friends. We were like 16 or 17, and daubed on the wall NF equals Nazi. Because National Front was you're too young, you guys, to know, but National Front was a racist organisation.
We love you, Martin.
Charm your way out of
I'm just trying to charm you guys. No, but National Front was a serious racist organisation, and they had a lot of support. See, I'm not talking about 50 years ago. This subject would have been very different, the way I would talk about it. There was loads of racism. It was overt racism on the street everywhere. It's a different time. I'm not saying racism doesn't exist, but it's not on the statute books of Trinity Laban. So
that's a really important point, Martin, that you have that background of
I'm
getting
totally
arrested for your principles, which are very, in the true sense of the word, anti-racist views.
Totally, yeah.
You are an upstanding citizen with a history of fighting for the rights of marginalized people in this country. And so when we say this is not left or right as far as politics goes, we really mean it. Yeah. We have people who come to us at the Free Speech Union who are on every side, all over the political spectrum, and yet the story you've told would resonate with them over and over and over and over again. The sort of basic steps of what happened to you, how quickly it escalated, and how catastrophic the outcome was. We see it all over our casework, Martin. It's a really important point that you have that background as well.
Yeah.
And that transformation in the meaning of anti-racism, which I think flawed a lot of us, because I'm the same. I have the same kind of political background. The first politics I was involved in was anti-racist politics, and in London in the early 90s, and I was aware then that it was much less bad than it had been previously, but even so, there was still kind of issues. But then suddenly we didn't understand this, the sort of what do you call it, the tidal shift in what it meant. The meaning changed, and it became this very, very different divisive ideology, which had nothing to do with the kind of attempt to bring people together that anti-racism had been about. And I mean, the number of people like you who are casualties of exactly that, of having been the anti-racist, and then the kind of the sea changes direction, if that's possible. I guess it is tidal. I don't know. Metaphors are difficult for me.
I'm just going to say about that, because in the old days when I was young, it was totally different. Like the left, I would align myself with the left in the old days. Anti-racism left. That means something. As you said, it's totally different now.
Yeah, they've changed the meaning of the word.
So left and right mean nothing to me now.
Well, I would really recommend that everybody goes out and buys Martin's music, listens to it, lobby venues to put on gigs by Martin. It's brilliant. I mean, your output is so varied as well, and it's really fabulous. So I think people should go and donate to your crowdfunder, go and listen to your music and extol its virtues to everybody else, and then share the story, because it's such an important story that I think so many people now, they understand that this is going on, but it's and they there's greater resonance and familiarity with these kinds of horror stories, basically, which is what they are. But we have to start winning them and winning back people's reputations, successfully reinstating people. I think that's the ultimate vindication, is that people have to be restored to the position they were once in.
And I completely agree with you. And thanks for the plug about my music. Yeah, go to my YouTube channel. And there's loads of music on there. And at Bandcamp, I sell the CDs and recordings. But the other thing I want to say is that other people need to stand up. The students, be brave. You know you're wrong. Most of you know this is wrong. And staff, be brave.
Yeah.
Talk about it. And it hurts you in the end, doesn't it? If you continue down a path that's not consistent with who you are at core, in terms of knowing what is right and wrong, you wake up one day and you go, hang on, I don't know where I am now.
Well, you can get ill.
I left my real core belief over here about 10 years ago.
Exactly.
I've found myself here. How do I connect my bits back? That's when you really do need a therapist, because you've cut totally sort of the cognitive dissonance and the separation within your own psyche becomes unbearable. And you have to effectively roll the clock back.
That's exactly it. That is totally it. So these people are self-censoring, permanently self-censoring. And that's, as you said, I mean, that's not going to make people feel well for long term if you're not speaking from your heart. I feel great. I'm speaking from my heart. I'm just speaking. Of course, I want it all back. Well, I don't want to go to the Trinity Laban, but I want the music back. I want to play.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, within the Free Speech Union, we're now 25,000 members. That's news very hot off the press. I'm sure there are people in those 25,000 who can help rebuild all sorts of people's lives back. And, maybe someone who owns a concert hall, or is looking to put on a series over the summer or something like that. Then your name, Martin, is on their list. This is someone who's gone through the mill. Let's get him in. Let's get his music.
That'd be amazing. That'd be amazing.
Yeah. No guarantees, obviously.
No, you said it now.
The more we can get the word out, the better. There's so many different ways in which we can build people back. Sorry, Jan?
So weddings, bar mitzvahs.
Yeah.
That's right. Is there anything else you want to say, Martin, as we kind of wrap up? It's been really interesting talking to you.
Yeah, there was a few things. One was everyone's self-censoring, and there are different levels of this. So I'll give you an example that a player I played with for 20 years sent me an email and said, I'm not going to play with you now, but I'm not ruling it out in the future. Now, what does that mean? It means, when you're not racist in 6 months, or people not describe, I'll play with you. So there's that. And what a lot of these musicians are doing is they're looking at their status. And by the way, most people do this in the world, I think, looking at where their status is in the community they're in, the jazz community I'm talking about. It's a small community, really. So I'm getting all these people, this person's getting these gigs, and if I am associated with Martin Speake, I know people are going to cancel me. So I'm not going to be brave, even though Martin has given me thousands of pounds of work over the years, and I played with him when I was a student, and he's given me lots of opportunities. That's a lot of musicians, by the way. So that's someone in their late 30s or something. Then a student sent me that, and I forgive the student more, a 20-year-old student, but still need to speak up. And then there are older people, like the leader of the London Jazz Orchestras, a bit younger than me, accusing me of the usual things that shut down conversations, which are far-right conspiracy theorists, right? These terms, racist and offensive, that just shuts everything down. Because the London Jazz Orchestra, that's really sad, because they play my music. It's an amazing band. I love it. I never made any money out of it. It's just once a month at the Vortex Jazz Club. So I play all my music. But I said, look, when this first started, I said, why don't I just come in and talk to you about the issues? Oh, no, it's too hot a subject and they're anxious. So it's the same thing. The students are anxious. And adults of 60 are anxious.
This is bullshit. Anxious.
It's insanity.
It's bullshit. Excuse my language, but it's not anxious. What they mean is they're scared that you're toxic. That's what it is. They're not anxious.
They're scared. They're not anxious. They're scared I'm toxic, but also they can't have the conversation because I'm right. I'm basically right. Yeah. Look at the statistics of it all and everything, of musicians and the positive discrimination for black musicians, But they know I'm right.
Yeah, they're cowardly and they're self-interested. That's what it is.
Yeah,
not anxiety.
So this is going on. So yeah, right. So I don't know. I just hope more and more people speak up and just don't suppress themselves.
Well, Martin, I hope that you will continue to live by your surname, which is just screaming out at me as you've just got over the last 40 minutes, is that your surname says speak.
Well,
your surname should be the motto.
This friend of mine said, don't you find it a bit ironic your name is Speake and you haven't been able to say anything for a year?
Calm down.
So you won't stop me now. It's like I can keep going for hours.
Now, it is Speake with an E.
That's right.
And that makes it even more.
Don't get it wrong.
Well, Martin, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute joy speaking to you. It's not been a joy hearing the craziness that has happened to you, and the obviously very serious consequences of what's happened to you. But we wish you all. We're standing by you, and we wish you such good luck and good wishes as you go into the legal case later in the year, and as you seek to rebuild and put your life back together. So, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Martin.